said that the Israeli prime minister has authorized the Israeli military to streamline the process of targeting these senior Iranian officials, effectively, not needing certain approvals when an intelligence and operational opportunity presents itself. But what we've also seen today are Israeli strikes on Iranian oil and natural gas facilities. That's according to the Iranians and Israeli sources, although Israel hasn't yet publicly and officially confirmed that it carried out these strikes. They appear to be the most significant strikes on Iran's energy infrastructure since the beginning of this war. It's not the first time, of course. We saw Israel carry out those strikes on fuel depots outside of the Iranian capital that made the sky black. It made it rain oil, basically. So Israel is clearly showing that it is still willing to continue targeting those types of targets, despite the blowback that it faced for those initial strikes on those fuel depots near Tehran. And it's already getting some pushback, including from Qatar, which shared one of these offshore oil facilities with Iran, and said in a statement that this is a, quote, dangerous and irresponsible step by the Israelis. The Americans, for their part, are saying that this was an Israeli strike, not an American one, but that they were aware of the fact that these strikes were being conducted. Isa?
All right, we've been telling you about the vital importance of the Strait of Hormuz, which, of course, a fifth of the world's oil output normally flows through.
And while Iran's blockade has choked off most traffic through the waterway, still some ships are getting through. Eleni Giokos reports.
Is the Strait of Hormuz really closed? Marine traffic shows tankers are turning off their tracking data before entering the narrowest part of the strait. Then, when through the strait, tankers reappear on the other side. Only 90 tankers have transited through the Strait of Hormuz since March the 1st, and that's according to Lloyd's List intelligence.
On a daily basis, you would normally expect to see 65, 70 tankers pass on a daily basis. So we really are seeing a trickle of the normal volumes of traffic.
The strait handles around 20% of the world's oil supply. So who's getting through? Lloyd's List data reveals most are part of shadow fleets. It's a group of ships that usually operate outside of normal international shipping rules. In this case, mostly carrying sanctioned Iranian oil and likely headed to China. Data also shows traffic is dominated by Iranian-linked vessels. A much lower number of compliant fleets have moved through. Around March 13th or 14th, 2 India-flagged LPG carriers and a Pakistan-flagged crude oil tanker on March 15th. So how are they doing it? Iran says it has given clearance to some vessels. It's not clear what the process is, but Iran says it will only target American and Israeli-linked tankers. United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations reports 21 vessels have been attacked since the start of the war. And that's a threat to shippers.
It's the Iranians who are in control of the Strait of Hormuz. It's as simple as that. You are not seeing ships move because there is a direct threat to vessel safety.
Trump is trying to find a way out of this oil supply shock, and the US has realized it cannot do it alone, reaching out to allies to create a coalition to assist with naval escorts. Experts say this is a clear signal the Trump administration didn't fully calculate the economic hit the world would feel from the impact of the closure of the straits. Eleni Giokos, CNN, Dubai.
Israel now says it killed another top Iranian official overnight. The U.S. is dropping 5,000-pound bombs now on Iranian missile sites along the Strait of Hormuz. We've got the latest.
Overnight, TSA lines still enormous, at least an hour-long wait at the busiest airports in the world since 4 this morning. Some airports considering shutting down, with fewer TSA agents showing up each day. No end in sight.
All right, you can swim, but you can't hide. A suspect on the run, or on the swim, caught after a high-speed paddle. I'm John Berman with Kate Baldwin and Sarah Sider. This is CNN News Central.
All right, let's get to the breaking news this morning. The U.S. military has unleashed one of the most powerful non-nuclear weapons in its arsenal, and they've done it on Iran. 5,000-pound guided bunker buster bombs that can penetrate deep underground. The target, Iranian missile sites near the Strait of Hormuz, that critical waterway and oil shipping channel that has been effectively shut down since the war began, and of course after Iran began attacking ships. And overnight, these lights we're going to show you in the skies over Tel Aviv. You see that right there? They appear to be cluster munitions fired by Iran. Multiple locations were hit with falling debris. According to emergency services, at least 2 people were killed by missile shrapnel in central Israel. There's also video showing a vehicle on fire on a residential street covered in debris. Iran is retaliating after 2 of its top officials were killed in Israeli strikes. And the breaking news this morning is Israel says it has targeted and killed another top Iranian official, this time Iran's intelligence chief. A fire burned outside the grounds of the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad after it was targeted for a second night in a row. And the State Department has now ordered all U.S. diplomatic posts to immediately review their security amid this spillover effect of the war, as they're describing it. That's according to a diplomatic cable sent worldwide and seen by CNN. Let's get to it this morning. Oren Lieberman is in Jerusalem for us. Oren, can you give us the latest what you're hearing about this breaking news of Israel saying it targeted and killed the Iranian intelligence chief?
Kate, Israel said just moments ago that it had taken out another top leader of the Iranian regime, this time Iranian intelligence minister Ismail Khatib. And this comes effectively 24 hours after Israel assassinated Ali Larijani, the top security official in the country and viewed as the de facto leader who was making many of the security and political decisions ever since the assassination and the opening strikes of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. What's clear at this point is Israel continues to view anyone who holds a leadership position in Iran as a legitimate target, and they have said they will continue to go after those targets here as we get near the three-week mark of this war. Israel also saying, and this is specifically Defense Minister Israel Katz, that they will streamline the process of targeting Iranian officials. In a statement during a situational assessment in which they announced the killing of the intelligence minister, Katz said, "I have authorized the Israel Defense Forces to neutralize any senior Iranian official once an operational and intelligence opportunity arises without the need for additional approval." So Israel is accelerating here its attempt to go after Iran's leadership. Katz said there are surprises ahead for Iran. Well, we've already seen one of those, and that comes from the United States, a 5,000-pound GPS-guided bunker buster that was targeted at shipping missiles and hardened missiles in a bunker near the Strait of Hormuz, that critical waterway on your screen right there. The problem here is that no matter how successful that strike was, Iran has still effectively closed it, not with the use of force, Kate, but with the threat of force. And that has been enough to effectively close one of the world's most critical waterways.
Also, I mean, obviously Iran has vowed and has continued to retaliate. And now this comes as the United States is telling embassies essentially worldwide to review their security operations.
This has been one of the concerns pretty much since the very beginning here, where this is part of Iran's asymmetric strategy. It doesn't need to fight Israel or the U.S. toe-to-toe when it comes to war. It can lash out, it can attack through its proxies, and it can threaten U.S. facilities and Israeli facilities, for that matter, worldwide. We have already seen that when it comes to the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. Another set of projectiles targeting the compound there. Unclear, I believe, if it's Iran itself or Iran-backed proxies in Iraq, which have obviously worked hand in hand with the Iranian regime. But we have now seen several days of projectiles, some getting through there, that have struck the embassy compound in Baghdad. And Kate, that could spread.
Absolutely. Oren, thank you so much for bringing us this breaking news this morning. I appreciate it. Sarah.
All right. Thank you, Kate. Today, President Trump is expected to attend a dignified transfer as the bodies of U.S. service members return home. They were killed when their refueling aircraft crashed in Iraq. It came as the president says the U.S. should reconsider its NATO membership and slammed allies for refusing to take part in the war. CNN's Kevin Liptak joining us now. Is there any sign that the president will actually pull out of NATO?
Listen, I think anytime the president questions the U.S. commitment to NATO, it causes European leaders to sit up and take notice. He did say yesterday he didn't have anything specific in mind when he was asked whether he was rethinking the U.S. commitment to NATO, but he did suggest perhaps reconsidering the trillions of dollars spent on European security. He said he would not need Congress to go about that. I think it's pretty clear that the president is extraordinarily frustrated with these European nations rebuffed his demands to send warships to the Strait of Hormuz. Lindsey Graham, clearly very close to the president, said that it was the angriest he had ever seen him. The president saying that this was essentially a loyalty test that these European nations had failed. Listen to what he said on that front.
Well, we don't need too much help, and we don't need any help, actually. I think NATO's making a very foolish mistake, and I've long said that, I wonder whether or not NATO would ever be there for us. So this was a great test, because we don't need them, but they should have been there.
No, it bears reminding NATO is a defensive alliance. It provides for the collective defense of a member if it is attacked. The only time that clause was invoked was after 9/11 by the United States. Many of these European leaders questioned why they would come to the defense of the United States when in this particular war, it was the U.S. and Israel that attacked Iran. Now, ultimately, this was a relatively short-lived attempt at nation building by the president. He really didn't make any attempt to get buy-in from allies before the war began. Many of these countries wondered why they would get mired in a conflict that they neither began nor were consulted on beforehand. Sarah.
In the past 24 hours, we knocked out 2 of the terrorist chieftains, the top terrorist chieftains of this tyranny. Our aircraft are hitting the terror operatives on the ground, in the crossroads, in the city squares. This is meant to enable the brave people of Iran to celebrate the Festival of Fire. So celebrate and Happy Nowruz. We're watching from above.
Okay, so when he talks about Nowruz, for everybody who might not be familiar with Persian New Year, that's Persian New Year. It's celebrated on the first day of spring, coming up on Saturday here. And the Fire Festival is held a couple days before Persian New Year. So, Rosemary, let's wrap up here by talking about the other main avenue of conversation and certainly developments. That's the United States launching 5,000-pound bombs on Iranian military targets around the Strait of Hormuz. We showed the map not too long ago. That is as a means of trying to secure the strait. But interestingly enough, what analysts have told CNN, among them Brett McGurk, who used to serve in the White House from the days of the George W. Bush administration up until the last Trump administration before Trump 2.0, he and other analysts have been telling us that you can wipe out perhaps these anti-ship missile installations that were the point of this mission, but you also have perhaps thousands of boats along this waterway that can launch attacks, and it only takes one to instill, a feeling of potential chaos with one ship potentially attacked. So his point was this could be the first of up to, in his words, up to 3 weeks of action by the United States and Israel to make this shipping channel, the Strait of Hormuz, safe. So a lot going on. We should also mention that Tehran state media, they're reporting damage in residential areas. That video is now on CNN.com. We're working on some more reporting on that. But a lot happening as the Middle East is waking up the early morning hours there that we're tracking as we are awake here in East Asia. But those are the 3 main centers of activity that we can report right now, Rosemary.
And we thank you so much for covering that so well. Mike Valerio with that live report from Beijing. Appreciate it. Well, I do want to bring in Mehran Kamrava now, Professor of Government at Georgetown University in Qatar. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So Iran is vowing revenge and retaliation for the killing of its security chief, Ali Larijani, and Iran's leader of the Basij paramilitary force. In actual fact, they have just begun responding by launching missiles toward Israel. What is the significance of the killing by Israel of these 2 men specifically?
Well, the head of the Basij, commander Soleimani, was not popular in Iran. and his death is unlikely to be mourned by many ordinary Iranians. Larijani's death is a different story. He wasn't necessarily popular, but he was a figure within the deep state. And I think it's important to note that he was extremely pragmatic and practical. He knew the inner workings of the system, and he was responsible for many of the top decisions that the state was taking, particularly in relation to the nuclear file and the conduct of the war. He was extremely pragmatic. So I wonder if his killing was deliberate on the part of Israel.
Very latest, Iran is vowing revenge against Israel for an attack that killed its top national security official, Ali Larijani. The leader of Iran's paramilitary force was also killed. The commander-in-chief of Iran's army says the response will be decisive and regrettable. In central Israel, officials say at least 2 people have been killed by a ballistic missile attack. CNN cameras captured what appeared to be a cluster munition exploding in the sky above. And the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, Iraq, coming under fire from Iran for the 2nd day in a row. Local security officials tell CNN the area was targeted by at least 4 projectiles, including 2 drones, with at least 1 landing in the vicinity of the compound. Earlier Tuesday, air defense systems intercepted another projectile aimed at the embassy. There is some damage around the embassy, but no reports of casualties. Let's bring in CNN's Mike Valerio, tracking the latest developments from Beijing. Mike, what are you hearing?
Well, Alex, I think we can group what we have seen overnight in the Middle East, and of course we're awake on this side of Asia, into 3 main storylines. There's the Iranian retaliation for the death of Ali Larijani and Gholam Reza Soleimani. There's the Israeli response, Israel, of course, not done yet. And then there's what the United States has done over the past 24 hours and hopes to do for the Strait of Hormuz. So let's continue into the Iranian response. As we saw from our CNN cameras at the top of the show a couple seconds ago, these Khorramshahr missiles, among the most powerful in Iran's ballistic missile arsenal. Our own Jeremy Diamond, our Jerusalem correspondent, showing what appear to be cluster bomblets from those Khorramshahr missiles exploding over the skies of Tel Aviv, suburban Tel Aviv, the cities that are right next door to the gleaming metropolis in the center of Israel. So this attack is in response to the death of Ali Larijani, top security official in Iran, and Gholam Reza Soleimani. So let's talk about Soleimani first. He was the leader of the Basij militia, which, if you're trying to keep track of everything that is part of the Iranian security apparatus, that is essentially the volunteer militia of people who are trying to keep the Iranian populace in line with the regime and suppress dissent. So that guy in charge of that operation, Ali Larijani, in charge of the security apparatus writ large, and also one of the main figures in nuclear negotiations. So this is an attack in response to the death of those 2 people. We heard from Prime Minister Netanyahu earlier today, and he said essentially that they are not done and that they could be targeting, certainly he is not off limits, the new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei. Listen to a soundbite from the Prime Minister of Israel. He references Nowruz, which is the Persian New Year, which comes up first day of spring on Saturday, in addition to the Fire Festival, which is celebrated right before Persian New Year. Let's listen to what he said. We'll talk about it on the other side.
In the past 24 hours, we knocked out 2 of the terrorist chieftains, the top terrorist chieftains of this tyranny. Our aircraft are hitting the terror operatives on the ground, in the crossroads, in the city squares. This is meant to enable the brave people of Iran to celebrate the Festival of Fire. So celebrate and Happy Nowruz. We're watching from above.
So again, this is him conveying that not just military targets and economic targets in Iran are being sought after, but as many high upper echelon people in the regime as possible. But of course, that leads our analysts and people who we speak to when we interview them at CNN all 24 hours of the day to really ask who is going to replace these officials? And as we enter day 19, Alex, that's really what we're watching for. What does it say about Iran if the regime is going to become more hardline based on who, if anybody, is announced taking the place of these two individuals? What does it say about where the regime, such as it is going? And then our final point that we want to talk about, what America is doing, very interesting, attacking these Iranian military sites close to the Strait of Hormuz with 5,000-pound GPS-guided bombs. And our own Brett McGurk, a CNN analyst who served in the White House since the George W. Bush administration and all White Houses since up until this administration, has said that that is certainly aimed at taking out anti-ship missiles that are along the Strait of Hormuz. But you got to think, Iran has thousands of boats that could potentially lay mines or do damage. And, you know, all analysts who we talk to say, Alex, as I'm sure they tell you as well, it only takes one. It only takes one catastrophe to wreak havoc, send the price of oil sky high. So we do have this attack, very interesting with these 5,000-pound bombs, but a lot could still be done in the next few weeks. Brett McGurk is saying this could be the start of a 3-week campaign, Alex.
Iran's effective shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz has locked up roughly 20% of the world's oil since the U.S. and Israel launched their war nearly 3 weeks ago. Consumers around the world are starting to feel the effects. Let's go to CNN's Ivan Watson, who is live off the coast of Hong Kong. Ivan, how is the closure of the strait impacting global shipping and energy prices where you are?
Look, you're feeling it when you try to buy gas at the pump. You're feeling it when you try to buy plane tickets because jet fuel is more expensive right now. And the reason we're out here is to explain why. This is one of the ships, the kind of ship that has been targeted since the war broke out in Iran. This ship itself, it's a liquefied petroleum gas tanker, was in the Gulf just days before the war broke out. It made it out safely. It's worth tens of millions of dollars without its cargo. It's more than the length of a football field, right? About 150 meters long. And the Iranian government has targeted more than a dozen ships like this. We've seen tankers burning off the coast of Iraq that Iran claimed to have hit with submarine vehicles. There was a cargo ship from Thailand that was hit trying to transit the Strait of Hormuz a week ago, and 3 of its crew members are still missing. And when you get up close to one of these ships, it helps illustrate how vulnerable they are to things like drones, like missiles, like speedboats, all the types of asymmetric weapons that Iran has that can target ships like this. And this is why the Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed right now, and why you can't get oil from the Gulf, which supplies 20% of the world's oil, can't get it out right now. Iran has made it clear it will target shipping. In fact, I'm going to quote the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament on X saying, quote, "The Strait of Hormuz situation won't return to its pre-war status." Those threats are very real right now. The Trump administration wants to reopen the strait to allow ships like this to move again. Before the war, about 140 ships like this would pass through the strait, both directions, every day. Now it's just a handful. And I'm just going to pan over here so you get a look at some of the other types of ships that typically come to a place like Hong Kong. This is the lifeblood of the global economy, Alex. This is where we get our fuel, our container, the stuff that goes to IKEA, flour, rice, whatever. And when these ships stop moving, we all feel it in our wallets and in our pocketbooks. There are hundreds of ships stranded on both sides of the Strait of Hormuz right now. The Trump administration is calling for countries to help reopen the strait. He's asked for China, Japan, South Korea, NATO member countries. So far, nobody is volunteering to help. In fact, what we've seen is the opposite. Some countries are clearly trying to negotiate side deals with the Islamic Republic of Iran. In the last week, we've seen tankers safely transit the Strait of Hormuz to India and to Pakistan. And just 2 days ago, a Hong Kong ship actually went into the Gulf through the strait. The Iranian government says it is negotiating with at least 8 countries right now to allow safe passage of tankers carrying energy out, provided that the oil is paid for with Chinese currency. We don't know if that's going to succeed yet, but there has been some movement. What's clear is that Iran is trying to impose conditions for this vital shipping through the Strait of Hormuz right now, and threatening ships like this if they don't comply with Iran's demands. And so far, the U.S. has been unable to fix this problem. Alex.
Ivan Watson reporting for us from Hong Kong. A shout out to you, and a shout out to your photojournalist for keeping that shot steady on a moving boat. Nicely done. What an incredible view you have from there. It's really amazing to see. Coming up, with the Strait of Hormuz blocked to ships, ground transportation is providing a lifeline to the Gulf region. Hundreds of trucks are now bringing vital food and medical supplies into Kuwait each day from Saudi Arabia. CNN's Nick Robertson is at the border and has our report.
These trucks here are the new lifeline bypassing the Straits of Hormuz. The Straits of Hormuz closed for oil getting out of the Gulf, closed for goods that would normally be coming in. And right now, these convoys coming out of Saudi Arabia, going into Kuwait, they're bringing in food, they're bringing in medical supplies, they're bringing in all the equipment that would normally get to Kuwait and other Gulf countries, normally get there by ship or by air. The Iranians have closed the Strait of Hormuz. The airspace is closed because of all the missile strikes that are going on. And if you come round here, you can get an idea of all the different products that are on their way into Kuwait. Now, officials there aren't talking about food shortages yet, but people in Kuwait tell us, look, we're a desert kingdom. We're in the desert. It's a desert country, and we need to import 90% of our food. So this lifeline here that the Saudis say is passing about 900 trucks a day, 9,000 trucks gone through from Saudi to Kuwait, they say, since the war began, is absolutely vital. And it gets more vital the longer the war goes on. It's part of the Gulf solidarity. These trucks here are driving in from Saudi Arabia from about 1,000 miles away, about 1,800 kilometers across the whole of the Arabian Peninsula, from Saudi's western coast, from the port city of Jeddah on the Red Sea. They can do that because the Red Sea isn't blockaded. It's not under fire at the moment, which means there's a way to get all this equipment, all this food, all these medical supplies into countries like Kuwait. But right now, the Iranians have already started threatening the Red Sea with potential strikes because the USS Gerald Ford, the aircraft carrier, its battle group, are in the Red Sea at the moment. So this lifeline, vital, going to get more important if the war continues, but because the Red Sea now appears to be potentially under threat, even this way of getting around the siege of the Strait of Hormuz that Iran has put in place, even this could be under threat too. Nick Robertson, CNN.
The U.S. military says it struck Iranian missile sites near the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump is lashing out at NATO allies for not assisting in reopening that vital waterway. He claims Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE are on board to help, but he hasn't said in what capacity. Now, that strait has been effectively closed since the conflict began due to threats from Iran. CNN's Eleni Giokos has more.
Strait of Hormuz really closed. Marine traffic shows tankers are turning off their tracking data before entering the narrowest part of the strait. Then, when through the strait, tankers reappear on the other side. Only 90 tankers have transited through the Strait of Hormuz since March the 1st, and that's according to Lloyd's List intelligence.
On a daily basis, you would normally expect to see 65, 70 tankers pass on a daily basis. So we really are seeing a trickle of the normal volumes of traffic.
The strait handles around 20% of the world's oil supply. So who's getting through? Lloyd's List data reveals most are part of shadow fleets. It's a group of ships that usually operate outside of normal international shipping rules. In this case, mostly carrying sanctioned Iranian oil and likely headed to China. Data also shows traffic is dominated by Iranian-linked vessels. A much lower number of compliant fleets have moved through. Around March 13th or 14th, 2 India-flagged LPG carriers and a Pakistan-flagged crude oil tanker on March 15th. So how are they doing it? Iran says it has given clearance to some vessels. It's not clear what the process is, but Iran says it will only target American and Israeli-linked tankers. United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations reports 21 vessels have been attacked since the start of the war. And that's a threat to shippers.
It's the Iranians who are in control of the Strait of Hormuz. It's as simple as that. You are not seeing ships move because there is a direct threat to vessel safety.
Trump is trying to find a way out of this oil supply shock, and the US has realized it cannot do it alone, reaching out to allies to create a coalition to assist with naval escorts. Experts say this is a clear signal the Trump administration didn't fully calculate the economic hit the world would feel from the impact of the closure of the Strait. Eleni Giakos, CNN, Dubai.
So we go from Dubai to Hong Kong. CNN's Ivan Watson has our best live shot location of the day. He's checking out how the strait is impacting global shipping. What are you seeing there?
Well, I want to give our viewers a close-up look at the kind of ships that have been impacted by this war and why you're starting to feel the pain at the gas pump or if you're trying to buy plane tickets. This is an LPG tanker. It's about 159 meters long.
Is explicitly threatening potential protesters who may look to take advantage of the chaos, even telling people not to mark Tuesday's annual Festival of Fire, which leads up to the Persian New Year. President Trump weighed in on the government's crackdown from the White House.
They put out a notice 2 days ago. Anybody that protests will be immediately shot and killed. That's pretty tough stuff.
CNN's Shamana Karacha reports on the people caught between foreign bombs and a repressive regime.
Celebrating the death of their oppressor. This is what the world saw coming out of Iran last month after Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was killed. But cloaked in digital darkness, a new wave of brutal suppression was already beginning. Teenage brothers Ahmed Riza and Amir Hossein Faizi were among the crowds that poured into the streets on February 28th. This was the car they were in with their father, honking the horn in celebration. Security forces opened fire on them, according to activists. As the regime faces America and Israel from the sky, it is tightening its grip on the ground, determined to extinguish any ember of an uprising. 2 months ago, it did just that, killing thousands of protesters in the bloodiest crackdown in the history of the Islamic Republic. Iranians still reeling from the collective trauma of January 8th and 9th, now being warned, take to the streets, and it will happen again.
Our team have their fingers on the trigger.
The chief of police threatening protesters. They will be treated as the enemy and shot. The feared Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps promising another massacre of protesters. This time, they say, they will strike harder than they did in January. Messages we've received from Iranians inside the country describe a regime using every tool in its playbook to crush dissent.
Every time you go outside, even just to go to the market, you see machine guns and dushkas, heavy guns on the streets. Everyone is afraid of the checkpoints. They are basically the regime's street-level enforcers.
People are randomly being checked, their phones being searched, being asked questions like, "What are you doing out here?" They even arrest and take them for further investigation.
Video trickling out, only a small window into this new climate of fear. Iran is a superpower, they chant. Iranians are proud. Regime supporters roam the streets at night with a menacing message. They are still here. They are still in control. State media, like so many times before, has been airing videos of those arrested, allegedly confessing to being foreign agents.
Text messages like this one warn those who find a way around the imposed internet blackout will be treated as spies. This crackdown only expected to get worse as outside forces that want to overthrow this regime add fuel to the fire.
We are now at the decisive stage of our final struggle. Await my final call.
The Israeli prime minister telling Iranians his forces are, quote, creating the conditions on the ground for them to rise up. As the IDF releases video like this, showing what it says are attacks on regime checkpoints that have become a major instrument of suppression and killing the regime's top leadership, one after the other. An uprising seems impossible right now for those who find themselves trapped between two hells. From inside their homes, they still defiantly cheer against the regime that time and time again has failed to silence a people risking it all for freedom.
Ambassador, how big a blow to the Iranian regime are the killings, you think, of those two high-level security officials, particularly Ali Larijani, who was seen as the country's de facto leader in recent weeks?
Well, I think both are significant. Larijani was the secretary of the Supreme National Security Council, which is a pretty important position, but he was also clearly functioning very close to being a deputy to the now deceased senior leader, Khomeini, perhaps even more important than the civilian president of the country, who has been kind of sidelined. So the loss of Larijani is another big hole in the top of the leadership. And the killing of the commander of the besieged militia, I think, is also significant because that's the force of really armed thugs that have enforced discipline in the streets of Iran cities, who are primarily, I think, responsible for killing 30,000 or more Iranian civilians last year for demonstrating. When you combine killing the commander of the besieged with what Israel and the U.S. have been doing, targeting besieged checkpoints in major cities like Tehran, destroying them as they're manned in the streets, I think it says to the besieged they're very much in the bullseye here, and I think that could have a profound effect on them.
It does seem like the IDF is targeting, as you point out, levers of control over the population in Iran. I don't know if that's to try to foment or make more possible the idea of some sort of regime change from some sort of a popular uprising. If the U.S. were to stop their side in this, do you think Israel would continue with that?
Well, I think it's possible, although many in Israel say, look, Trump started the war, Trump will end the war. That's what happened last summer. In June, when the Israelis were on their 12th day of a bombing campaign. Trump had the U.S. drop 14 bunker busters on one day and then said, okay, the war's over. Israel still had a very long target list. And the bombing of the besieged, as in all of the attacks on the Revolutionary Guard, are intended to destroy the instruments of Iranian power that both threaten us externally and threaten their own people internally.
Bill says it will pursue, find, and, quote, neutralize Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei. A spokesman for the Israeli military says his country will continue to target anyone posing a threat to Israel.
Mojtaba Khamenei's fate is unknown. We neither see nor hear from him. But I can say one thing. We will continue, as we have proven, we will continue to pursue anyone who poses a threat to the state of Israel. And anyone who raises a hand against us is not immune from us. We will pursue him, find him, and neutralize him.
Iran has now confirmed that 2 of its senior officials were killed in Israeli airstrikes. The Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, claims the ongoing military operation is undermining the Iranian regime so that the Iranian people can remove that regime. In Lebanon, Israel says it is continuing to strike Hezbollah targets, including weapons storage facilities and launchers. Joining me now is Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon. Ambassador, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me, Jim.
You heard me just note there that the Prime Minister, Netanyahu, said that Israel is undermining the regime to give people a chance to then remove it. You have said yourself the time is coming very soon for Iranians to rise up. But as you know, U.S. intelligence seems to indicate that the regime is not currently in danger of falling. So I wonder, is that still a realistic goal for the Iranian people to retake their country?
Absolutely. You know, for 47 years, they were oppressed by this regime. They suffered so much. And now we are weakening the regime. Every day we target the leadership. You know, we target the IRGC and other security forces that they have there. And I think the time is coming for the Iranian people to decide about their future, to rise up and to make sure they take control of their future. You know, they waited for this opportunity for so long. Now the time is coming. We know it's not easy for them, especially after what happened in January.
That Israel, America's ally in this war, is now vowing to, quote, neutralize anyone who poses a threat to Israel. Now, that includes Iran's new supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, who has not been seen or heard from since he was elected to take over from his father. And now Iran is vowing to avenge the deaths of top leaders who were taken out overnight, the most significant assassinations of any sort since the war began. In a statement, the Iranian President Pezeshkian promising to get revenge after that Israeli airstrike killed top security official Ali Larijani. Larijani was the public face of the Iranian regime. He was in the Middle East and Gulf countries just a few days before the war began. He already was the face of the regime. New video just into Outfront shows a huge cluster munition meantime tonight. That right over the skies of Tel Aviv. We don't have word tonight on whether there were any injuries from that, as they've been using more and more of these cluster munitions over Israel. Iran vowing revenge after Israel says it killed two of the regime's most prominent figures, the two most prominent since they killed the supreme leader himself. It includes the top security official, Ali Larijani, who had been the diplomatic foreign face of Iran and one of the most outspoken voices during this war, with sharp attacks on President Trump, including posting Trump has betrayed America first to adopt Israel first, saying he must pay the price. He has martyred our leader and our people, and then warning Trump he could be killed, like Khamenei posting, watch out for yourself not to get eliminated. Well, also the IRGC is confirming that the head of its paramilitary force, who is known for cracking down on dissent inside Iran, has been killed by the Israelis in that strike. So both of those individuals killed. Nazila Fathi is out front now. She's a New York Times former correspondent based in Tehran for 10 years. And she was forced to flee with her husband and children, but of course, family and friends are still there tonight. Nazila, Larijani obviously was core. I mean, in the week prior to the war, he was in the Gulf, for example, right? He was a diplomatic force. And I know you have concern that his death could backfire on Israel as well as the United States. How come?
So first of all, Iran is going to retaliate. And whenever Iran retaliates, it doesn't fight on one front. It usually coordinates with its proxy forces and it attacks on various fronts. So it is very possible that it would launch multiple attacks through its proxy forces. It did announce today that it's going to intensify missile attacks on Israel. But the loss of Larijani was not just a big blow to Iran, but also, I believe, it's going to be a strategic problem for the United States, because Larijani was the kind of person that had the internal ties within the Islamic Republic to become the person the United States could negotiate with when the dust settles. And without him, there are not a lot of Iranians left within the establishment who have the kind of cross-factional ties who can be in that kind of position.
So, you know, obviously I mentioned this is the most significant blow to Iran's leadership since the beginning of the war, right, with the supreme leader and so many around him killed. You know, I guess the question is, what is the best that you can ascertain from how people, regular civilians on the ground, are feeling about this? You know, some of these leaders, of course, had done horrific things to people, but how are they perceiving what's happening now when it comes to their elimination?
Erin, I think Iranians are numb. First of all these men had the blood of Iranian people on their hands. And Iranians are deeply scarred by what happened just a month ago. Thousands of innocent Iranians were basically massacred. But at this stage, they are numb. First of all, there are so many leaders who are being assassinated one after another. On the other hand, they are under very intense bombing. Every time I speak to someone inside Iran, they tell me last night was the worst night. They talk about the magnitude of the bombings that are increasing. They talk about the timing of the bombings, that they happen like every 2-3 hours, and how powerful they are. Their homes shake. So, you know, and Iranians are also in a communication blackout. They have not had access to the internet since the war broke out. They are getting their information either from Iranian TV or from satellite programs that are beamed inside the country. So they are not shedding tears for any of these leaders, but they are looking forward to the end of this conflict.
Yeah. Nazila, thank you very much. I appreciate your taking the time tonight.
Tonight, the Israel Defense Forces is vowing to pursue, find, and, quote, neutralize the nation's new supreme leader, who remains in hiding tonight, as that warning comes after there was an Israeli strike overnight that killed Iran's top national security official that you can see here, who had once been viewed as a potential transitional candidate by the United States and Israel. This was before Larijani oversaw the brutal crackdown on those anti-regime protesters that happened earlier this year, and was something that President Trump himself noted today.
Everything is gone. Their leaders are gone. A lot of people say their actual top was killed yesterday, along with somebody else who was responsible for the killing. The man that was responsible for the killing of 32,000 people over the last 2 weeks. He was in charge of the killing of protesters. They put out a notice 2 days ago. Anybody that protests will be immediately shot and killed.
Joining me tonight is Kareem Sajapur, an Iran expert and a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. And in terms of the significance of Larijani's death, I mean, how are you reading into that tonight?
It's very significant for the regime because Ali Larijani was really the only one left in that system who had decades of both domestic policy experience and foreign policy experience and decades of institutional memory. So one of the last really competent people in that regime, and not someone who is easily replaceable.
We were just speaking with the Republican congressman and Senator Andy Kim about this, and Andy Kim was making the point that just because you take a hardliner out doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be replaced by some more moderating force. Is this something where that is a potential for whoever replaces Larijani?
So as the president alluded to, Ali Larijani was a ruthless guy himself. He was implicated in the massacre of 30,000 people potentially last January. But there aren't that many, I would say, competent officials left in this system. So it is indeed true that they will replace him with someone who could potentially be even more dogmatic than him. But I do think this was a demoralizing blow to the regime. That said, we still haven't seen any cracks in the system, and we still haven't seen any signs that it's a regime prepared to change its long-time revolutionary identity.
What stands out to you right now about what we are seeing and hearing from inside Iran?
Well, we still obviously haven't seen Mojtaba Khamenei, who is ostensibly the supreme leader, the most powerful guy in the country. We think he's in hiding. He's been injured in the attack that killed his father and his mother and his wife. And some of the senior advisors to him, these really thuggish characters behind the scenes, they're probably also in hiding because they have Israeli bullseyes on them. And so you ask yourself, how on earth can this system last like this when it's hiding underground? They can't communicate with one another because their communications have been so thoroughly penetrated.
In the Middle East, it's a tense situation in Riyadh right now. Sirens blare just as top ministers from around the Arab world gathered in the Saudi capital. There were loud explosions in the city, and Saudi civil defense said they'd dealt with a ballistic threat. This comes after Iran vowed to retaliate for reported attacks on its oil and gas production sites. A US official says it was Israel who struck. Iranian gas fields. Our international diplomatic editor, Nick Robertson, is in Riyadh. Just explain to us how serious this is, Nick, because it feels like a massive escalation for, this to hit Riyadh.
The targeting of Riyadh by ballistic missiles isn't something we've seen. If it's been happening, it has not been reported by officials here. Certainly, lots of drones have been fired in the vicinity of Riyadh, and that looked like the alarm going off. We just had an all clear. That's the alarm going off again. We're inside. We're in the venue where the foreign ministers are meeting. There are a dozen to perhaps 20 of them here. And I think this just reflects this siren going off now. And when I heard the siren going off about an hour and 20 minutes ago, literally stepped outside of the building that we're in here, and I could see an illuminated piece of debris or missile crashing down to the floor about a mile away from where we were standing. So the intercepts that have been going on from these ballistic missiles over Riyadh, the sirens themselves are unusual, and this, of course, is the first meeting face-to-face of foreign ministers from the GCC and other Arab and other neighbors in the region. This is the first time they've been able to sit down together and have a high-level meeting to discuss how they respond to Iran's war. We know that the GCC has already called Iran out over attacking facilities in the region, breaking the norms of international humanitarian law is what they say. But this is the first face-to-face meeting. And there was another round of ballistic missiles incoming, 4 intercepted over Riyadh about 3 or 4 hours ago. There again, we heard the explosions. We could see the interceptors flying up. Again, just to restate, although that's become the normal in Qatar, in the UAE, in Kuwait, in Bahrain, it's been absent from the capital here of Saudi Arabia, Riyadh. So it's very unusual that we get this sudden spike of intercepts, alarms, ballistic missiles, just when the foreign ministers are having a key first face-to-face meeting, Max.
Saudi Arabia is hosting a meeting of foreign ministers from Arab and Islamic nations today. The aim is to discuss regional stability and security in the context, of course, of the war in Iran. That is according to the Saudi Foreign Ministry. And we are now just getting word of loud explosions in Riyadh. That's where we find our Nick Robertson. Nick, bring us up to date with the very latest there. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, Issa, I think it's also important to kind of mention here as well, this is the first time that across the Gulf and from the region, foreign ministers have met in person. Leaders, foreign ministers, have been having conference calls, but this is the first time they've been brought together in Riyadh. And this evening has been exceptional, not just because of their meeting. They are in this same building where we are. A few minutes ago, we were hearing alarms going off, warning of some incoming missiles potentially, then explosions. And as I stepped out of the door here, I could see a large piece of something crashing towards the ground. Not clear if it was a missile or an intercept. And I have to stress again, this is unusual in Riyadh. We haven't seen this in Riyadh since the war began. There have been drones that have been intercepted. A couple of hours ago, sirens were going off again. The Defense Ministry said that 4 ballistic missiles were intercepted over Riyadh, that debris had fallen on the city, but there was no structural damage, no injuries. We witnessed the interceptors taking off from the center of the city, and we could hear the explosions of the intercepts or the missiles coming down. Unclear. Again, to stress, that is exceptional in Riyadh. So to have these Iranian strikes with ballistic missiles on the capital, Riyadh, when the foreign ministers from so many countries, I was talking with the Turkish foreign ministers, he was going in a few minutes ago, so many foreign ministers here, it strikes us here as unusual that Iran would make the targeting here when this first high-level face-to-face meeting is happening, Issa.
Yeah, especially because the foreign ministers were all meeting there, and I understand as part of that meeting is trying to find some commonality, being on the same page, of course, regarding this war, and I'm guessing also regarding the Strait of Hormuz. What, in terms of what you're hearing coming out of this meeting, what are you hearing from some of these foreign ministers who now have had the chance, like you said, to actually speak to each other face to face?
I think what we can expect to hear is unity. I think we can expect to hear how they're supporting each other. Of course, Saudi Arabia on its Red Sea port of Jeddah is importing all the sorts of goods that would normally go by sea through the Strait of Hormuz and transporting them by land to Gulf partners. We witnessed that at the border with Kuwait just yesterday. Hundreds and hundreds of trucks taking goods, food, medical supplies, other equipment into Kuwait. So I think we'll perhaps hear something about that. But of course, what we've also heard from the GCC countries is a condemnation of Iran for its attacks, breaching international humanitarian law. We've also heard them speaking about the cautious approach. When we get briefings, we're reminded that the countries here are taking a very cautious approach, that they're not sure of President Trump is trying to achieve in Iran, and that they're very concerned about getting dragged into a prolonged conflict. Now, when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, of course, they have a vested interest in seeing that open, a heavy invested interest. Countries like Saudi Arabia desperately need there to be peace so that their economies can prosper and all the investment they want to make in their countries for the future can happen. So I think we may hear that sort of language coming out. I don't think we're going to hear a change in position. Let's wait and see. This is the first time they've met face to face, but unity for sure and how they're supporting each other will be key. And I think obviously the White House will be listening for any kind of language that would indicate that they might join the United States. I would be surprised, at least from the briefings we've been having, that would happen today. I don't expect that.
There to the Middle East and what some analysts say could be the opening salvo in the battle over the Strait of Hormuz. The United States says it dropped bunker-busting bombs on Iranian missile sites along the strait today. But even if that air campaign is successful, experts say Tehran may still have thousands of options to threaten those ships. President Trump is taking another shot at allies who rebuffed his calls to send warships to police the Strait of Hormuz. In an online post, the president said American allies should take sole responsibility for the security of the waterway in the US, if the US finished off what is left of the Iranian regime. Now, many European leaders say they'd join a coalition to patrol the strait once active hostilities end, though. CNN's Elena Treen is with us now from the White House, and we were talking about this rift with the rest of NATO, weren't we, yesterday? But you know, it's clearly something that he didn't predict, how the Strait of Hormuz would play out, and he hasn't got a plan for how to get out of this one, does he?
No, and that's really been the reporting that we've had now, Max, this idea that the United States and the Trump administration has been unprepared for this issue. And part of that, from our reporting, is about the mines that we know Iran has been laying in the Strait of Hormuz, even though we've heard the president say that they've been, the United States military has been blowing up some of the ships Iran has been trying to use to lay those mines. We did also hear from the president just yesterday saying that he had requested specifically that the UK Prime Minister offer to send minesweepers to the Strait of Hormuz to help with that issue. And of course, this is something, as you mentioned, a lot of them are trying to stay out of this while the hostilities are ongoing. But one of the things that they have done, and we've seen the Trump administration act today, which also kind of contradicts what we're hearing from the president, this idea that this is an issue that will get solved, or is an issue at least that he thinks allies should be the ones to solve. We saw the Trump administration take a big step toward trying to help what we've seen with the volatility in the oil markets thus far, and that was with the White House temporarily lifting key limits on its shipping of oil, gas, and other commodities. And this is really, it's the waiving of what we call the Jones Act, which is allowing, again, temporarily, they said it'll be for the next 60 days, that the United States will allow foreign flag ships to transport these commodities to different U.S. ports. So this is a way to try and alleviate a lot of the pressure we've seen with these, supply issues with oil. And so that's one step that they they are taking. Obviously, this is not going to be enough, and the Strait of Hormuz is such a crucial problem that this administration is facing. And despite what we've now heard from the president repeatedly, trying to argue that this isn't an issue, that he believes that they will be able to get it solved quickly, it is a persistent one that they have not yet been able to solve. And part of the reason it's been such a problem as well is one of the big concerns this administration has been facing, and it's growing by the day, is this idea that many Americans were not sold on this idea of going to war with Iran in the first place. And the higher oil prices tick, the higher we're seeing gas prices in the United States, the more pressure that puts on the U.S. to do something about this. So as much as the president is trying to say this is a problem for other countries, of course, he wants their help. It is not something that this administration, of course, is going to try and leave the responsibility with them. They know they need to solve this issue and try to do so as quickly as possible, Max.
Elena, thank you. Well, as Iran holds a funeral procession for its slain security chief, Ali Larijani, Israel says it has also killed the Iranian intelligence minister. Esmail Hatib's death, announced by the Israeli defense minister after an overnight strike in Tehran. A top Israeli intelligence official says Israel's campaign of targeted killings is creating, quote, chaos in the Iranian regime. Iran is vowing to take revenge for the killing of Ali Larijani. Overnight, 2 people in central Israel were killed in an Iranian ballistic missile attack. Multiple locations in Tel Aviv struck by falling debris. And now Iran's Revolutionary Guard warns of, quote, powerful action after what it describes as an attack on their fuel and energy infrastructure. Joining us now, Jeremy Diamond, live from Tel Aviv. I mean, whatever people think of the Israeli operation here, these very targeted assassinations are proving highly effective.
Well, there's no question that Israel has killed a large number of Iran's senior leadership, and we are watching as this assassination spree is certainly continuing and likely to continue even further. The latest is, of course, this intelligence minister in Iran who was assassinated in an Israeli strike overnight. The news of that killing came the same day that Iranians buried Ali Larijani, that senior security chief. Of course, before that, there were dozens of other senior Iranian officials, including the former Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, in that opening wave of Israeli strikes. And in fact, today, the Israeli Defense Minister, Israel Katz, said that the Prime Minister has now authorized the Israeli military to effectively jump through fewer hoops in order to be able to pull the trigger on additional assassinations of senior Iranian officials as soon as the intelligence and operational window opens for those strikes to take place.
Okay, Jeremy Diamond, appreciate it. Thank you. Lebanon says nearly 1,000 people have been killed in the country since Israel began attacking it on March the 2nd, including 116 children. This as Israel continues to strike at Hezbollah targets there. It carried out an overnight airstrike in central Beirut, destroying a high-rise building near the Lebanese government headquarters. Israel says it also blew up gas stations in southern Lebanon, claiming they supported Hezbollah. And Lebanese state media say Israel has begun attacking crossings on the Litani River. Israel had warned it would do so to prevent Hezbollah from transferring weapons into the south. Well, crowds gathered today in Tehran for the funeral of Iran's national security chief, Ali Larijani. He was killed on Tuesday, as we were hearing there, by an Israeli strike. His death marks the highest level assassination since Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, was killed on the first day of the war. Larijani is thought to have played a key role in suppressing anti-regime protests in January and led the government transition following Khamenei's death.
Well, Iran's president's calling the assassinations of his country's leaders cowardly. That's among the latest developments in the war. Israel says it has killed Iran's intelligence minister. That's a day after it assassinated 2 other top Iranian officials. The IDF said Ismail Khatib died in an airstrike. There were massive crowds in Tehran, meanwhile, today for the funeral of Ali Larijani, one of those officials killed in an earlier Israeli airstrike. Larijani was Iran's security chief and a key voice of the regime. And while NATO allies may have rebuffed US President Donald Trump's call to join the operation against Iran, they are talking about how to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Secretary General Mark Rutte told reporters today he's spoken with a number of countries about that critical waterway. Have a listen.
When it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, I've been in contact with many allies. We all agree, of course, that strait has to open up again. And what I know is that allies are working together, discussing how to do that. What is the best way to do it? They are working on that collectively to find a way forward.
Well, let's get more. Kevin Liptak's at the White House for us. Jeremy Diamond is in Tel Aviv. Kevin, let me go to you first because President Trump is in Delaware, expected to pay tribute, of course, to 6 U.S. service members killed in Iraq last week in what I believe was a refueling crash. Just remind us of how that happened and how they're being remembered today.
Right, and the circumstances of this crash are not explicitly clear. Central Command has not said precisely how this KC-135 refueling tanker went down. It was involved in an incident with another aircraft of this same type. They said that it was not a result of either hostile or friendly fire. It went down in friendly territory, but beyond that, they have not specified what exactly happened, but it did result in the death of those 6 American airmen who are now returning to the United States for this dignified transfer that the president is attending up in Delaware. These are very, very somber ceremonies. You know, having covered a few of them with presidents in the past, they are reflective moments, I think. And I think for a commander-in-chief, you know, there's no other moment that I think instills on them the weight of the job, the weight of responsibility that they carry as they put troops in harm's way. And that, I think, has taken a toll on President Trump in the past. Certainly, I've talked to him about it after these ceremonies, and he has been affected by them. This is the second one that he has attended since the start of the Iran conflict. He was at Dover just a week and a half ago about to observe the return of the remains of 7 additional American service members, the American death toll in this conflict now standing at 13. The 6 who are coming back today, 3 of them were based out of MacDill Air Base down in Florida. 3 others were based at an air base in Ohio, all of them, of course, leaving behind families, parents, spouses, and in some cases, children. So certainly, I think a very heavy moment for the president. You know, he said after attending that last one that he did not expect that it would be the last time that he was at Dover Air Force Base. He said that he hates to do it, but that it's part of war, sort of acknowledging that the human toll of these conflicts is very heavy, but also that it would continue on. And I think that's a fact that will be weighing on his mind as he considers and debates in his own head whether to send American ground troops into Iran. He has not ruled that out. And we know that among the options in front of him are, for example, sending troops to Karg Island to try and reclaim that critical area, or sending troops to try and get back the nuclear material that remains buried underground at the Isfahan nuclear site. Those are all decisions that the president will have to make. And I think attending this dignified transfer today only makes that decision even weightier as the president considers these very, very risky missions going forward.
Absolutely, must be one of the hardest moments as commander-in-chief, of course. Let me turn to Jeremy. And Jeremy, just focus on Iran here. What more can you tell us about Israel strikes in Iran? They're continuing, and more detail who they've been targeting, Jeremy.
Well, Israel's assassination spree is certainly still continuing, killing yet another senior Iranian official overnight. This time it is the intelligence minister of Iran. That news coming the same day that Iranians buried Ali Larijani, that senior security official in Iran who by many was considered the de facto leader of the country. And of course, before that, we saw dozens of other senior Iranian officials, including, of course, the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, in those opening waves of strikes. And the Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz says, as he was confirming this, he promised that there would be more surprises from the Israeli military. And he also said that the Israeli Prime Minister has authorized the Israeli military to streamline the process of targeting these senior Iranian officials, effectively, not needing certain approvals when an intelligence and operational opportunity presents itself. But what we've also seen today are Israeli strikes on Iranian oil and natural gas facilities. That's according to the...
We're going to check in on Saudi Arabia, where its air defense system intercepted Iranian missiles over the capital, Riyadh. Foreign ministers from Arabic and Islamic countries were meeting there to discuss regional security. Timing is notable. Nick Robertson is live in Riyadh. And Nick, I wonder, part of the core of this relationship, right, of this alliance with the U.S. and allowing U.S. troops to base in the region is this sense of a U.S. security umbrella. Has the confidence of Gulf allies in that security umbrella been breached by what we're seeing here, as Iran is able to get some attacks through?
Yeah, we haven't heard that from any leaders, any officials here, Jim, but certainly in the conversations we're having behind closed doors with lower level people, that's a sentiment that the dynamic changes, that things won't be the same going forward. I don't think anyone's expecting an overnight change or significant change, by the end of the year or the end of next year even. But of course, the calculus is going to change. That dependency at the level that it's been at, they're buying most defensive products from the United States, relying on their supplies of Patriot and other defensive missile systems, THAAD, for example, all of which are deployed in Saudi Arabia, will be under strain and under question. And just to sort of bring you up to speed with what's happening here this evening, because I think it's significant that this is the first time in the Gulf that the foreign ministers have been able to meet, any leaders have met here face to face, bringing in some regional foreign ministers from Egypt, from Jordan, from Turkey, from Pakistan, from Azerbaijan as well, to address collectively the current security environment. But as you say, just as they were gathering in the capital, for the first time that we've witnessed here, and we've been here since March the 1st, there were sirens going off on people's phones. We witnessed intercepts in the sky, ballistic missiles fired into the sky. We witnessed the intercepts going up, heard the very, very heavy explosions. The Defense Ministry here saying there were 4 rounds of ballistic missile, 2 rounds of 4 sets of ballistic missiles. And again, ballistic missiles in of themselves represent an escalation of what's been fired at Riyadh. Until now, it's been pretty much drones that have been targeted at the capital. And we've learned from the Ministry of Defense that an oil facility just south of the capital here has had some damage. So it is a very powerful message and an abrupt message that Iran has chosen to show these foreign ministers as they've been arriving here. It is, in terms of Riyadh, a significant uptick, and I don't think any of these foreign ministers meeting, that this will have been lost on them, Jim.
Yeah. Well, please keep yourself and your team safe there, given that, well, sometimes these things get through. Our thanks to Nick Robertson in Riyadh.
And tonight, Iran hitting new targets, causing extensive damage, striking after the U.S. and Israel attacked its oil and gas production facilities, which is a first, crossing a new line in the war. Now, the response. Several Iranian missiles just intercepted over Riyadh and Saudi Arabia near the site of a major meeting between officials in the region. Now, according to our Nick Robertson, who is in Riyadh tonight, the interceptors were fired from the center of the capital in Riyadh, which he says is unprecedented, right? Prior strikes have been outside to the airbase, the Prince Sultan Air Base. Now, debris from one of the intercepts falling near a refinery. And now a natural gas site has been hit by a number of missiles in Qatar. Qatar saying that the attack from Iran caused major damage, warning that it is yet another escalation. And the growing attacks have now sent the price of oil to more than $110 a barrel as the conflict grows on the 19th day of the war. And yes, the Strait of Hormuz is still closed to U.S. ships. President Trump is finding himself more isolated. Just listen today to the French President Emmanuel Macron.
France did not choose this war. We are not a party to the conflict. Therefore, France will under no circumstances take part in operations to open or liberate the Strait of Hormuz.
Categorical And by the way, a week ago, tanker companies were telling me, hey, it's going to be France. They're sending all these warships to the region, right? That there was hope that might happen. And now a very categorical answer from the French president. Jeremy Diamond is out front live in Tel Aviv. Elena Treen is at the White House for us tonight. I want to start with you, Jeremy, because right now we've got this escalation. Our Nick Roberts in Riyadh talking about this unprecedented moment of interceptors being fired from the center of Riyadh, and now Israel hitting Iran's navy, they say in the Caspian Sea. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, Aaron, this really has been an extraordinary day, and one that points to this conflict continuing to grow rather than any kind of diplomatic off-ramps presenting themselves. It began today with the news that Iran's energy facilities had been struck in one of the largest strikes on their energy infrastructure that we have seen during this war today. 2 different oil and natural gas production facilities in the south of the country. Israel responsible for those strikes, though Iran blamed both the United States and Israel, and subsequently it vowed that it would take powerful action against other oil infrastructure targets in the region. And we saw that action take place very shortly thereafter with that Qatari gas facility that was struck this evening, bursting into flames, and Qatar now firing back at Iran, at least on the diplomatic front, saying that they have declared Iran's military and security attaches persona non grata. The Qataris fuming about the fact that Iran chose to retaliate by attacking their oil and gas facilities. And we are also, of course, seeing those sites in Saudi Arabia. And then beyond that, Aaron, as you mentioned, we've also seen tonight that the Israeli military has, for the first time, struck Iranian naval ships in the Caspian Sea. That is to the north of Iran. And we haven't seen these types of strikes yet. And this comes, of course, as Israeli officials have continuously been telling us to expect more surprises. Again, today, the Israeli Defense Minister, Israel Katz, talked about this notion of more surprises, as he was also talking about continuing to target Iran's senior leaders, with new plans now to make it easier for the Israeli military to jump through fewer hoops, fewer approvals, in order to target those senior leaders should the operational and intelligence opportunity arise. Aaron?
All right, Jeremy Diamond, thank you very much. And interesting, the Israelis keep saying to us, more surprises, and then, well, they do deliver that. So when they say there are more, at this point, of course, it really does beg the question of how much more escalation is ahead.
New and rare Iranian strikes targeting Saudi Arabia. There was also a strike at a Qatari facility. Take a look at this video from Riyadh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. এই এখনই ইফতারের পরে রিয়াদ সানাইয়া 2 নম্বর ইশারায় যে বোম মারছে মিসাইল মারছে ইরান মারছে হয়তো মিসাইল।
That is the Saudi capital under ballistic missile fire for the first time in more than 2 weeks. Now, according to CNN's Nick Robertson, who's there, some of the explosions occurred not far from where a high-level meeting of Arab and Islamic foreign ministers was taking place. Saudi defense officials said that they also intercepted 2 drones. One was headed for a gas facility in the kingdom's eastern province. Now, it was not Iran's only attempt today on oil and gas targets. We don't have video of what Qatari officials say was a missile strike at one of their energy crown jewels, the world's largest facility for exporting liquefied natural gas. According to the foreign ministry there, a strike started fires causing what they said was a significant damage to the facility. Israel today struck oil and gas facilities on Iran's south central coast. The country's semi-official Fars news agency reporting that powerful explosions had been heard at several refineries in the area. Now, Iranian state media also accused the U.S. and Israel of hitting the South Pars natural gas field, and we'll talk about that more coming up, which is the largest in the world. There's also new reporting tonight in the Wall Street Journal that you should know about. The president wants Israel to pause strikes against Iranian energy infrastructure for now, but approved of the one today, according to the Journal, to send a message to Tehran. The price of oil has now hit a 52-week high. Crude settled today at $107 a barrel, then climbed further after hours, touching the $110 mark in the futures trading. Not a hopeful sign for gasoline prices, obviously. A gallon is now averaging $3.84, according to AAA. It's up from $2.98 when the war first started. Vice President Vance weighed in on that today.
The president said this, and I certainly agree with it. This is a temporary blip. Okay, what happened under the Biden administration is that gas prices were high for 4 years. Gas prices are higher right now And frankly, they're not even as high as they were during certain parts of the Biden administration because of what's going on in the Middle East. It's not going to last forever. We got a rough road ahead of us for the next few weeks, but it's temporary.
Well, acknowledging a rough road ahead as he did, that's a change in tone somewhat from just a day ago when the president's top economic advisor called consumer pain from the war, quote, the last of our concerns. Here's that quote from Kevin Hassett.
It would hurt consumers, and we'd have to think about, if that continued, what we would have to do about that. But that's like really the last of our concerns right now, because we're very confident that this thing is going ahead of schedule.
Well, ahead of schedule or not, there's late word tonight on what the war could directly cost American taxpayers. This comes from the Washington Post, citing a senior administration official. They are reporting that the Pentagon is seeking more than $200 billion to pay for it all. However, some White House officials are telling the Post that they do not think the request has a realistic chance of getting through Congress. Israel's campaign against top Iranian officials